Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Combat Chats podcast. And this week we're going to be going over the previous week's UFC 297 main card. Unfortunately, we don't have a card coming up this weekend, which is a real shame. It would have been nice to watch one. I can actually watch this one as well, but I wouldn't have been able to anyway. However, we had a really okay card, a lot of decisions. I feel like they were all decisions other than Neil Magny, which may as well have been a decision.
That was crazy.
Went on for about 15 minutes. So yeah, if you'd like to get started off.
Yeah, the card, overall, the early prelims started off good. I think it was 3 finishes for the early prelims. The prelims were decent. The main card, in my opinion, let it down. I don't know what your thoughts were on the main card overall.
So the main card, it was one of these things that a lot of the matchups I feel like were kind of... There were matchups in which you kind of expected to not be the most exciting. I was looking forward to the Evil on fight, and I thought that one was okay, to be fair. I didn't think that one was generally okay. However, there's fights like the Chris Curtis fight and the Neil Magny fight, I think they were more a matter of, they were just disappointing.
What about the Africa Benham fight?
Yeah, I wasn't great, admittedly.
It wasn't. Arnold Allen against Evloev. I think we both made good points that we saw prevail in the fight. Arnold Allen's footwork really causing Evloev problems at points. But Evloev managed to edge out just the end of the rounds. That was where you were seeing the main things happen. The first round very close, and Evloev manages to get some takedowns and kind of just manhandled him. Arnold Allen just Amari rolling his way out of every single situation he got himself into. I don't know how many times he must have done that during the fight. But overall, I do think this was actually a really close fight. It was just in the second round, Arnold got rocked, that causing a lot of damage. Other than that, I think Arnold was the one doing the main sort of pressing on the feet, and Evloev was struggling with some of the shots he was mixing to the body really well.
Yeah, no, overall, like you said, the footwork definitely provided some issues for Evloev. With Evloev, I feel like a lot of the time we see him with mostly a matter of he's able to kind of press forward and apply that pressure and bombard you. And Arnold Allen's footwork, I knew that there were a couple of attempts which he wasn't actually able to get Arnold Allen down, which is quite impressive for Evloev to not be able to get somebody down. And it was all to that footwork. It was so in and out, it was so bouncy, and was striking on Arnold Allen's part as well. Evloev, though, on the feet, looked very clean.
Yeah, he's a very dangerous fighter in everywhere it goes. Apart, his submission game not the strongest, but he has power as well. I mean, he kind of dropped Arnold with a jab. I'm surprised he doesn't get more finishes against these lower ranked guys.
Well, it's interesting because if you look at how a lot of his decisions tend to end, it's normally with him on the ground striking. That's normally where a lot of his decisions are coming from, scoring these points. So you would expect it, and there's definitely that power there, 100%. With this fight, it was really interesting to see Arnold use his jiu-jitsu very well. You can tell he's got very high level jiu-jitsu because something which Evloev does is that when it comes down to his grappling game, I do feel like his jiu-jitsu isn't something which he utilises much, and I think it's something he might have to work on.
Yeah.
He's also at risk of submission a lot as well.
Yeah, he is. I mean, we saw I think it was a ninja choke or something that Allen caught him with was it the third round, I think? Really, really deep in, and he had to sort of scramble his way out, and we saw in his last fight as well against Lopez just how many submissions he fell into.
And that's the thing, and a lot of the time he does feel like he doesn't really tend to look out for it, or he's just so confident that he's not going to get subbed, he's going to be able to punch his way through the submission. I do feel like this is going to be an issue for him in the future, though. Overall, though, I think Arnold looked really good. I did predict Evloev to win this one. I don't feel like I predicted it in the way I did, though. I thought it was going to be more of a bombardment, and like you said about the footwork, I think that you mentioned that as well last week. A really good point. It did cause a lot of issues.
Yeah, for me I'm such a big Arnold fan, just how interactive he is with everyone on Twitter. I'm sure if you guys have ever commented on his post, how many people he replies to, he's a sort of fighter for the fans, and it was really frustrating to watch that. Overall, I thought he fought like not almost perfect, but a really good fight, and it was just these little situations that he was just losing split seconds of that cost him the fight overall. It's still a very, very close fight. Some people really thinking Arnold won on the social medias. Obviously, you see that with kind of every single fight that's even remotely close. But do you think there's any argument for the decision here?
So it's really interesting. I think the first round, although Evloev did land me takedowns, it's all a matter of how you're judging it, really. Yeah. Because Arnold was straight back up, like you said, you had the rolls going on. There was some very, very good transitioning. He wasn't being dominated in the ground the first round. No. I wouldn't say he was necessarily being dominated in the ground in any round at all.
No, definitely not.
It was all on the feet. However, I do also appreciate that when you are landing takedowns in a close fight, a lot of the time that could be what edges it. That could be what does it, even if it is a close fight, just adding that in there. Because we're not seeing Arnold necessarily shoot for takedowns, really, which you wouldn't in a fight like this. Those takedowns are what edges it. So I think that is the correct decision. It would be interesting to see who Evlev fights next, but I think he just has to work on my jiu-jitsu game.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing that surprised me, Evloev being ranked 9, maybe his most credentialed win, it being Dan Ige. Obviously, we know how good Lopez is and how close that fight was. Maybe Lopez is a higher caliber opponent, but Dan Ige being in the UFC so long, he managed to dominate him. And jumping from Dan Ige to Arnold Allen, ranked number 3, who is probably one of the best strikers in that whole division, and managing to hang with him on the feet, it just shows how far these sort of fighters are coming. You see with Islam Makhachev as well, being able to sort of control a lot of what happened on the feet with Volkanovski at times. It really does show that once these Dagestani fighters are coming with this sort of striking as well, it's a real scary thing. And I do think it will be interesting to talk a bit about who he can fight next. Obviously, Brian Ortega's fighting Yair Rodriguez. I think one that maybe makes sense, Josh Emmett against Evloev. I think that's a good fight. Emmett's coming off a big win. Maybe the winner of Brian Ortega, Yair Rodriguez. What direction do you want to see? I think both those matchups are really good.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting one. I like the idea of the winner of Yair Rodriguez, Brian Ortega. Yeah. I think that one makes a lot of sense. It's hard because he is at a point now where I think he's ranked number 5 now, right?
Yeah.
So he's gone from 9 to ranked number 5. He's just beating somebody who's had a very competitive fight with Max Holloway. Max Holloway is not an easy opponent at all. He is that gatekeeper of that division, unfortunately. But I wish he was a bit more.
Sounds crazy, doesn't it?
Yeah, to think that Max Holloway is a gatekeeper. He is more than that, though. He is more. It's just Volk is who Volk is. I think that does make the most sense logically, and it'd be interesting to see how long it takes for him to potentially, if he does win his next few fights or his next fight, potentially go for a shot at that belt.
Yeah, I do think they might go the Josh Emmett route. Josh Emmett coming off such a viral knockout, in my opinion, knockout of the year, one of the most brutal knockouts we've seen in the UFC. It's kind of good to market that. Well, to be honest, Dana White doesn't really like Evloev very much. I don't know if you saw the post-fight press conference on his thoughts on the fight, but he wasn't happy with it at all. He said it was one of the most boring fights he's ever watched, which is a bit weird. I thought it was a decent fight.
Yeah, I don't think this is a boring fight. So I think compared to some fights on the main card, this was actually probably one of the better ones.
Yeah. In
all complete fairness. Although I can understand where he's coming from. I thought though that Evloev did definitely show a lot more of what he can do on the feet.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's more impressive as well, especially when you do it against somebody like Arnold Allen. When you're doing this against people who are, low in the rankings, people who aren't as high a level as Arnold Allen, because you've got to remember, Arnold Allen has been in the UFC for quite some time now. And what we've seen of him on the feet in almost all his performances, other than these like mad flurries which he occasionally enters, technically on the feet he's very, very good. To strike like that, to strike that effectively against somebody like Arnold Allen, I can't see why you call that fight boring, because although yes there was the wrestling, it wasn't a boring Evloev fight. There are Evloev fights we've seen which are pretty boring. This was not a boring one at all.
Yeah, I think moving on to the next fight now, Chris Curtis against Marc-Andre Barriault. An okay fight. There was rumbles of it. Dominic Cruz calling it a sparring match, which in my opinion is a bit harsh. I think the last round it really picked up sort of in the pocket fighting. That's kind of what we expected the whole fight. Chris Curtis just showing off how technical he is with those sort of slip counters and really that southpaw traditional boxing style. You always see them sort of slick counter punches. Andre Barriault just showing how much of a tank he really is, trying to march through it all. But the fight started kind of slow. Were you surprised at the pace of the fight?
Oh, I think it's one of these things like with Chris Curtis, he kind of does like to speed out the first round. And it is something you see. I was expecting a bit more from Marc-Andre Barriault, to be fair. I thought he was going to be a bit more aggressive. And we did see that like towards the third round. However, I would like to have seen it from the get-go. Chris Curtis taunting him when they're both doing nothing. I think
he likes that.
Yeah, like it's all good to want to fight how you want to fight. Like you need to be fighting your fight. However, you can't draw him in like at that level like that, and it's just not very good to watch really at all. Really, overall though, I wasn't surprised at all. Really,
no. I think starting slow, it did pick up. in the last round, like I said, that kind of made it overall maybe more of an exciting fight than some people made out. I was impressed by Curtis. I think moving on, fighting someone out of the rankings, he's kind of had two big fights where they've ended in sort of weird scenarios. So now maybe he gets another good ranked opponent and he can move on from there. But we'll jump straight on to the next one. Neil Magny with a massive upset, stopping the fight with just 15 seconds left. In a fight that, let's be real, Mike Malott was completely in control of. Kind of gave up his back and just maybe too tired, or I don't really know. It must have been fatigue that got to him. Neil Magny showing how much of a veteran he really is, staying in there the whole time. Didn't look completely out of place in the first round. Second round, it got quite rough for him. But third round showing why he's so tough and why he's been in these rankings for so long. He isn't leaving anytime soon. How impressed were you with him?
Well, Neil Magny, not very
no.
really, if I'm honest with you.
Not
it's
a great
good
question.
finish. It wasn't a great performance from him. It was a nice finish with like 15 seconds to go.
Yeah.
It's one of these things. It's a real shame because Malott definitely wasn't in control of the fight. He was 2 rounds up the entire fight. And the way he fights is that he fought how I thought he would. He'd take it a bit slower, but he'd be landing these single heavy strikes. Going for a lot of leg kicks as well. You can definitely tell that he's been doing his research on Neil Magny and his legs. However, he was in control the whole time, and when he was landing these takedowns, he was in control then. And it's a real shame what happened because although you have to respect Neil Magny, he has fought everybody. It's a shame that a fight like that, a fight which is, let's be honest, dominant, not in the sense that it's necessarily he's berating him with strikes, but he's just so in control.
Yeah.
He is in charge of Magny, really. He ends like that. It's very disappointing as well. However, I don't think that necessarily shows that Neil Magny is... It's hard to know where to go from here because it's not fluky, but it doesn't feel super deserving at all, really.
No, obviously, that's what the sport is. That's what makes the sport so great. Us being UK fans would know it best with the way Leon Edwards won the belt and how many other fighters have won the belt like that too. But being dominated that bad throughout the whole round, you had to feel a bit bad for Mike Malott. But that's what happens when these fighters that, let's be real, haven't had loads of sort of disadvantages on their way up to these big opportunities that he was getting, first ranked opponent. And like in hindsight, well, not in hindsight, but when the fight first got announced, you see it and you think it's kind of like a perfect matchup for him. But in hindsight, I'm not surprised when this sort of stuff happens. How many times have we seen someone who's meant to be a massive prospect come up against a ranked veteran who looks like they're on the way out and they just can't survive long enough to beat them?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like Mike Malott, you look at his fights, so many first round finishes.
Yeah.
He's very used to fighting the first round, and I think about a lot of it, like you said, when you're fighting an experienced veteran like that, the whole experience, like it all comes into play. If you're not experienced fighting these fighters like Neil Magny, who have been in the UFC for years and years and years, these fighters who have a bit more tough and grit to them, if you're not experienced in that, when you get to that third round and somebody's on top of you and they're about to start landing strikes, the look on his face, he looked concerned.
Yeah.
It's almost like a look of panic, really.
Like he's never been there before. He has got a loss. I haven't seen the way he lost, but it's sort of like we see it a lot with undefeated fighters where they're put in their first sort of disadvantage or showing a bit of adversity and they can't really battle their way through it.
And that's the thing, it's an unadvantageous position and it's not somebody who you want to be putting in an unadvantageous situation against. You got to think you're winning a fight very comfortably. Magny knows he has to put you out. Magny knows he has to put you out, so he's going to try and put you out. And it's not as if he wasn't trying to do anything the first 10 seconds, first 10 or 15 seconds or so. He is continuously moving around. He's trying to do what he can, but he covers up in the end.
Yeah.
And it's one of these things, it's a shame really, because you can't not stop it, because if you don't stop it and he gets put out cold, it's an awful stoppage. Incredibly late. However, he was just broken.
Yeah, he was.
And it's a shame really, because it's you can't not, I mean, I'm not saying they should let go on, because they definitely shouldn't have.
But like when there's that long left, it's like you see it when fighters are in these deep submissions sometimes, and there's like 10 seconds left of the round and they tap. It's just like, what would happen if you just wait that 10 seconds? But Mike Malott waiting those extra 15 seconds would have not been good for his career, probably.
Yeah. I mean, do you reckon, like, say for example, they were in a sub and they didn't tap and they black out, but it's just after like the bell rings?
I think there's got to be some scenarios
Like,
where that happens.
Surely you've won, right? Because I know fighters.
Well, if the ref doesn't call it off, then yeah, you've won, haven't you?
What do you do about that situation? Like when you're trying to work out, like
I like the ones where it's like, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Matt Hughes and someone, Carlos Newton or something like that, maybe, where he sort of power slammed them down when he was in a triangle choke, and they both went out at the same time. And it was a hard one to call. You don't know who wins. You kind of just got to guess who went out first. But yeah, it's one of those things. Anyway, you just got to see what is happening.
Would that be like a no contest or a?
Yeah, it's so weird. Just give them both a win, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird.
Draw.
Yeah.
draw by finish.
Yeah. Yeah, overall, the fight was okay, But we'll move on to the Neil Magny, let's just say this. Neil Magny managed to hang in there and get the finish. So much respect goes out to him. He's dealing with some hard stuff in his personal life and been off some really rough fights. Took a lot of damage and still showing how crafty he is managing to beat such a young up and comer. Moving on to the first title fight of the card, Raquel Pennington against Mauro Benasilva. Probably just not a great fight to watch when it's about 6 a.m. here in the UK and I've decided to stay up for it. But, Raquel Pennington finally getting that title. She's been in the UFC for so long, had a couple title shots before, or maybe just one. But fought so many good fighters, and I'm really happy that she managed to finally get the belt.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like, she has been in the UFC for very long, and she is very experienced, and she has fought almost everyone, really. And it's interesting because looking at Raquel Pennington, looking at the fight itself was not an exciting fight to watch. No. Raquel Pennington, she did look quite good. However, looking at Bueno Silva, she just wasn't putting in, really. She wasn't putting work in. The way she was trying to fight was, so my prediction was, I thought that Bueno Silva, I think, was going to submit her. That's what I thought on anyway, because I might have said something different.
It can change up in
it's one of those things, though, like, you think about it more. However, with this one, I think that Bueno Silva just tried that a bit too much. She was trying too hard to maybe try and get a finish, and to be fair, she was putting some nasty submission herself.
Yeah.
Raquel Pennington, she used her boxing and she kept going with the clinch, which...
Oh man, it was hard to watch.
Yeah.
Just kept full. She was doing so well on the feet. Like, every boxing exchange she was in control of and just kept running away into the clinch and almost running away into a lot of submissions as well.
And that's the thing, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. I suppose if you think that you can cause the damage in the clinch, but Bueno Silva, that's perfect for her, really, because that's where she'd look to take it down. Overall, though, I'd say it was a somewhat dominant performance, Pennington.
Yeah, in the end, it was pretty comfortable, wasn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't so much dominant in the sense, I mean, on the feet, it was definitely dominant. On the feet, 100% dominant.
I was surprised that Mauro Benasilva's head movement isn't great. There wasn't loads of time spent on the feet, but from what we did see, Raquel Pennington's striking has come a long way. She is actually a really good fighter. Like, she could beat a lot of fighters in this division. I think she might have a few title defences. I'd like to see how the Pina fight goes, but I was actually quite impressed with Pennington, even though the fight wasn't great.
No, I thought Pennington fought well, to be fair. Yeah. I really did. I think that would have been nice to see Bueno Silva a bit more active on the feet, though. Yeah. She does occasionally throw these really big shots and these flurries, which we just didn't see any of at all. It's very hard to go against somebody like Pennington, in all fairness. It's a lot easier to say than, to actually do it. But overall, it just wasn't a super exciting fight. 25 minutes to watching that. It's not ideal, but you get fights like that.
Yeah, I think Pennington going forward, it's going to be hard because Jermaine Duran made come back. I can't remember who she's fighting next, but Pina obviously has the submission game where if Pennington is falling into these submissions like she was against Bueno Silva, that could be dangerous. But the thing I took away is I was really disappointed with Bueno Silva's performance. We need to say our opinion on the fight. And she, in my opinion, looked the same choke she got Holly Holm with. She looked for about 5 different occasions. She wasn't ready to go 5 rounds. You saw Raquel Pennington being the veteran she has been 5 rounds quite a few times. that is really where she won the fight. I don't think she's the much better fighter, but she was just more conditioned to have that style of fight.
I'd definitely say it was a fight she wanted.
Yeah.
It's a fight she needed. And when these fighters are in positions in fights in which they are fighting the fight they want, that's how they win. This is not a fight for what is it at all.
No. Getting on to the main event now, Dricus du Plessis wins a razor close decision over Sean Strickland. People throwing out the robbery thing is just crazy, fights this close and never a robbery. And in my opinion, I don't think it was as close as people made out. I do think it was a very close fight, but I think, not clearly, but I gave it 3-2 to du Plessis quite comfortably. In my opinion, he was just going forward, trying to land those shots that were really the only shots that were ever going to end the fight. He was on the front foot the whole time, looking for those big shots, where Strickland was kind of on the back foot, throwing those 1-2s, defending takedowns, kind of just in a defensive shell the whole time, in my opinion. Did great damage with the jab and the 1-2, but Dricus having way more variety through some nice head kicks that kind of just clipped Strickland, mixing in the takedowns, landing some big hooks after he found his distance after the first couple rounds as well. So, do you have anything wrong with this decision?
I can understand why people are saying that I wish him his way. And the reason I say that is I do completely agree with you that Dricus did land the biggest shots, he did cause them more damage, and he did mix it up as well as just being on the front foot the entire fight. If you look at the shots, the strikes in which Strickland was landing, he was landing them in such a great quality. Those 1-2s were building up. I personally thought Dricus won the fight.
Yes.
I think 3-2, maybe even 4-1, potentially. Maybe, because it was a very close fight.
Yeah.
However, why I thought he won, the reason why I thought he won was because he was just mixing it up more and the damage he was causing as well. And the takedowns as well. Like we said earlier, the takedowns are often what will make a close fight go one way. And I completely understand it. I respect it. If you look at it, I wouldn't say takedowns in a control time sense, but more in a matter of just, he looked like a slightly more dominant performance. It wasn't a dominant fight at all. It was a very close fight. However, the way he was fighting like he was a dominant fighter.
Yeah.
He was much more on it. Strickland was landing a lot. And in fairness, Dricus, although he was throwing a lot, I don't know if it was all landing cleanly.
No, it wasn't.
Because we look at Strickland's movement, the reason why Strickland does so well against fighters who are throwing his big shots is because these big shots, he's evading them. His head movement is very good. His boxing defense is very good. I feel like with what Dricus was doing, with the damage he was causing, and with the volume, as well as just the quality, not in the sense of the accuracy, but just the power behind it, and the kicks as well. We didn't see Strickland throw many kicks until the last round.
Yeah, and the main thing for me is the argument I go to every time. If someone says Sean Strickland won, fair enough, but we know how this is scored. If you look at the rules, it says on the rule books, damage trumps all. It's considered the 3Ds, duration, damage, and what's the other one? My mind's gone blank.
Dominance?
Yeah, dominance, that's it. So, in those scenarios, Dricus being very close on the feet and then taking it down, you could say controlling the dominance area of the fight. The damage, I just like someone send me a clip of Sean Strickland landing a punch in that whole fight that you thought, I don't know how Dricus ate that one. Because there was definitely some that Dricus landed. There was a big overhand that caught him on the top of the head. There was the question mark kick that he barely just blocked. He was looking to land these bigger strikes where Strickland, to win these fights, he always, same with Cannonier, it was the same sort of style where he was fighting the big pressure power puncher, where he always makes these fights razor close. But when you're fighting someone who's really trying to take your head off and you're there just sort of looking to land jabs and kind of, let's be real, he's got a very sort of sparring sort of style, in my opinion. A style that you're going and sparring when you're just looking to, I don't know, for me there's never no real conviction with him. Like he's fighting someone like he trains with him or something like that. I don't know if you think that's too harsh.
So it's interesting, really. I think with Strickland, he's got the potential to be a really varied striker. He's got the potential to be very, very versatile. However, we often see him and it appears to be very basic. However, he can do everything, really.
Yeah.
He can do everything. He just doesn't do it. He's almost like he's fighting comfortably. For a championship title fight, this wasn't a great fight for that.
No, I agree.
And I think that you need to just see, because with Drykers, there was definitely hunger there. Because if you look at what he was doing, he wasn't like rushing in or anything like that. However, he was throwing with intent.
Yeah.
He was throwing with a lot of intent. And with Strickland, it almost looked like he was trying to win on points, which he was trying to win on points. He was trying to win on points. Throwing with these 1-2s, busting up Drykers with his open guard, his like wide guard. You know, I don't see the point in holding your arm like a jaw unless you're trying to protect the side of your head, which is fair enough.
To be fair, he isn't getting knocked out like he's just eating a lot of jabs.
And I mean, if you can eat it, you can eat it, right? No, it's obviously very risky, especially when your shin's there. With Strickland, you see the last 25 seconds of the fight, like obviously there were a few strikes thrown which were a bit iffy, but for the most part, he was showing what he should have been showing in the third and fourth round.
Yeah, maybe with a bit of a calmer pace, but that sort of aggression where that's the only time where it looked like he really wanted to hurt Drickus, in my opinion.
He was throwing head kicks, and like overhand hooks and like flying knees, and he was just throwing a massive variety of strikes really, which you needed to do at times. The reason why Drickus does well in these situations is because when he does win, he wins against fighters who are kind of not really able to cope with the pressure.
And breaks people, doesn't he?
At the same time, though, putting the pressure on Drickus, like this fight, you couldn't call this fight a war at all.
No.
And anyone calling it a war, I don't quite understand it.
No, it wasn't a war as in the fact that it wasn't standing there trading massive shots. I saw someone on Twitter say top 5 title fights of all time, which is mental. Sean, like, it was a good fight. When I first watched it, I wasn't as entertained as I was when I watched it back. When I watched it back, I did think it was better than I first thought, but still not. I wouldn't even consider it like a top tier good fight. I'd just say it's like one of those title fights you think, oh yeah, it was okay, and you forget about it in a few weeks.
It's probably not even in the top 15, 20 fights.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
That says it all really. So to call it the top 5 at the same time, but it's all subjective, I suppose.
People see it with blood covered in their. People see blood smothered their faces at the end, and they automatically it just gives opportunities for these big sort of platforms like ESPN and the UFC to tweet these things like absolute war, 25 minutes of hell, and then Sean Strickland on the mic saying, I told you I was all going to try and die for you and stuff, and it's just like, I didn't see that whatsoever. I don't know what other people were watching, but...
No, not at all, and it didn't feel like there was that fire in Strickland either.
No.
I felt like he was just very comfortable and a bit too confident, and he is, in fairness to a relatively new champion as well. He is a champion which hasn't... Well, he's a new champion, really. I'm
gutted for him as well, because I know... I'll openly say I'm a big fan of Sean Strickland. I know he says some crazy stuff. I'm not saying I agree with everything he says, but, you know, he's a real guy. He is there to fight for the fans. You can see me and a friend were talking the other day, and we were saying a lot of these fighters have sort of like fake humbleness where they're just kind of like walking around like they own the place. But Sean Strickland, you see him openly talk about like, he is not worth more than us because he's good at punching people in the face. Where, in my opinion, he is. You know, he's the best. He became the best in the world at a high, intense sport that destroys your body. So he probably doesn't rate himself as highly as most people. But he's come from a rough background, and he's a fighter that the fans could like naturally gravitate to. And it's a real shame that he lost the belt in his first defence.
Yeah, definitely. So it is a real shame. I would like to see the rematch. I don't know if you. Do you think that will happen right away?
Well, yeah, I think this is the thing that we'll naturally move into next, because we obviously don't have a card to talk about. There's a break this weekend, so we don't know how. It might be a bit of a shorter one today, but we will go into what happens with Dricus next. There's a few options. We'll get into the Strickland rematch, but I just want to get your thoughts on this first. Alex Pereira tweeted yesterday, the day after the fight, that maybe he has one more run at middleweight in him as well. I think maybe he just don't want to fight Ankalaev just yet. But how do you think he could get back down to middleweight? And if so, would you like to see that fight at UFC 300? Pereira was rumoured to be on it.
So that would be an interesting one. I don't want to see that fight for Dricus, because I think that, in my opinion, I think that's a relatively comfortable win for Pereira.
I think the grappling, though, Dricus has legit jiu-jitsu. I've watched some of his submissions, and he's got a really good ground game.
He does have a really good ground game. However, I feel like what we've seen of Pereira, we've not seen enough of it. And what we have seen, although in all fairness, it wasn't very much of it, did look generally quite solid. I do believe a solid foundation is there, and I think that's something
It'll just
which
be getting better too.
It'll be getting better, and we don't actually know how good it really is. Like, we have no idea whatsoever how good it really is.
Yeah.
So for all we know, he could have some of the best jiu-jitsu in the middleweight division.
Took his patent glove to share his powers off him.
Like, but you never know, though. That's the thing. He grew up in Brazil. Like, there's a possibility. I'm not saying that all Brazilians are good at jiu-jitsu, because that's obviously not the case. However, he will very highly possibly, if you look at how he trains and where he's training, but a high possibility he has very good jiu-jitsu. So I wouldn't be too worried about that so much. I don't want to see him fight Pereira yet, though. I want to see Dricus potentially rematch Strickland. I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
Or maybe even an Izzy fight, because obviously there's everything which has gone on historically.
Yeah.
I think now is a really good opportunity, saying that I don't know if Izzy should be getting a title shot at this moment, and that's the trouble.
That's what I think too. Izzy is the logical business move to do. Dricus even calling him out after, and Izzy pretending he was going to take some sort of big break just to get the fans interested again. It's funny because how long since the Strickland fight? Like, probably just under a year, right?
Yeah, it's been a little while though, hasn't it? Like,
but I mean, I wouldn't consider that like he's taking a break from MMA. Like, he made it out like it was some big thing.
I think it's all a matter of what you
for him. It's
to be
break,
active.
To be fair,
yeah.
He fought every 3-4 months.
A massive thing. So some fighters do fight every 3 or 4 months, and when you're fighting every 3 or 4 months, you are like taking a big break when you take more than like 5 or 6. Some fighters fight 3 times a year, 4 times a year. Some fighters fight once a year. Some fighters are the heavyweight champion and fight once every however many
2 years.
So I don't think he deserves it. However, from a business move, it does make sense. I think a Strickland rematch, I think Cannonier getting a shot.
Yeah.
Because
I think Cannonier, because me and you are big advocates on this not turning into boxing, and Cannonier coming off a win over Vittoria, dominant win, one of the performances of the year last year, and obviously beating the guy who just had a razor close fight with Dricus and who did beat Izzy for the middleweight championship. The logical thing would be Cannonier, but this will sound really harsh. You probably won't like me saying this, but Cannonier just in his whole demeanour, you don't want him main event in a pay-per-view. It's just boring. And last time he did it, he put on a really bad fight as well with the help of Adesanya. He just gives like generic answers in the press conferences. It's not something the fans want to see, and this is a sport for the fans overall. That's what brings the money in. So for me, that would be the last one on my list. I know that it probably shouldn't be, but I'd rather see Izzy or the Dricus-Shawn rematch. I think the Dricus-Shawn rematch would be at the top of my list just because how close the fight was. They'll probably both turn around, maybe even main event UFC 300. I know they both took quite a bit of damage, but money talks. So, I think that's the one I'd go with personally.
Yeah, so Izzy could make sense to an extent. He did only fight like in September last year. So it's only been like a few months really since he last fought. So it could make a lot of sense. The reason why I like the idea of Cannonier, though, I think Cannonier versus Izzy, the reason why it would have been so boring is because Izzy wasn't able to control that fight. I don't know if Dricus would be able to do the same.
No.
And that's not to say
it would be a good fight.
It's not to say that Dricus is necessarily a worse fighter than Izzy. However, the way fighters fight, some fighters are very good at controlling the fight. And when they control the fight, they fight their fight. And that's what Izzy does. You look at a lot of Izzy's big wins, it's because he's been in control. They've not been super exciting wins. So they've not been very exciting fights to watch. How they've been fights which he's been able to control, and he was able to do that with Cannonier quite comfortably. With Dricus, I think it's very different. I don't think Dricus is going to be able to control it until in the way in which he's going to want to. And against Vittori is a mixed opponent, really. He's very good. He's remained where he is. However, there are flaws which fundamentally keep him where he is and no higher. And I think that for Vittori to have done that, because I think that once you get past Cannonier, that's kind of the only real middleweight division at the moment. There's only a select few fighters who are really looking to be worthy of any kind of title shot. It's probably less than a handful, really.
Yeah, definitely less than a handful. I mean, Cannonier, and that's the only one who actually deserves a title shot, because Shawn, one title, not even one title defense, you don't usually see them get an immediate rematch. It wouldn't be the first time, just because how close the fight was. Izzy he's in his last 2 fights, he's 1-1, and did have a very good win against Alex Pereira, but lost before that, so he's like 4-2 or 4-3 or something like that. So
yeah, no, I think so. I think the next fight is going to be Izzy. I think that makes the most sense logically.
Yeah,
the one I want to see
be.
the most would be Sean. I've been after that candidate. The reason why I want to see the Sean fight is because I just want to see him fight better. Because I know that there is better. I know that he just needs to have a bit more urgency a bit earlier on. And he needs to not be fighting like that to win on points. If you want to fight to win on points, fine. But you need to do more than that. And you need to also understand, and you need to have your corner telling you to do a bit more than just...
Well, they were telling him to be fair. You can't blame the corner.
No, not the corner, but you need to be listening to your corner telling you. You need to have that corner really distilling inside you to do just a bit more, because it was so close on the feet. You cannot be winning on points in a fight that close. You cannot be thinking to yourself, I need to win and you keep doing what I'm doing. I need to do this because I'm winning on points in a fight which is that close.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what happens with that next. Maybe one of them will be in the main event at UFC 300. There is another talking topic I want to get your opinion on. The new updated men's pound-for-pound rankings have come in. It ranks Islam Makhachev 1, John Jones, Volkanovski, Leon Edwards, Pereira, Oliveira, O'Malley, Duplessis, Panjota. And I just think it's a bit harsh on the Panjota end. People, I know they don't like the pound-for-pound rankings anyway. They don't really know what it means. But Dricus Du Plessis, after beating Sean Strickland, not even defending his title yet, being ranked 2 spots above Panjota, and also Sean O'Malley above Panjota as well. Panjota's lapping people in his division. Beat Moreno 3 times. Beat Rovell twice. Beat Manuel Cape. It's crazy how many people he's beat, and just because it's the lower weight classes, I don't understand why he's not ranked higher. Maybe even an argument for Volkanovski to be above John Jones as well. I think a very logical argument. Do you think Panjota should be above Dricus and O'Malley, or do you think the O'Malley one's fair? I think the Dricus one's crazy though.
It's a really awkward one, because you can make the argument that, yes, Pantoja is fine if he's way lighter weight classes. If you look at Dricus, although he has beat some top opponents, he's not really done enough to be that high up in the pound rankings. He is 8th, mind. However, looking at this, when you have the likes of, Pantoja Pantoja's defended his title, how many times? Twice now. To do that twice and to be dominant. The only reason I would understand it logically is because at that weight, you are kind of fighting the same people over and over again to defend your title. There is literally, we talk about middleweight, there's maybe a handful. There's less than a handful. Yeah, that flyweight. And
the ones that he's beat most of them anyway. I mean, I think it's quite a stacked division, but it'd be interesting to see how much of the top 10 he's actually beat. Figueiredo, I think, being one of the only ones to beat him, and he's not in that weight class anymore. So, I think he just deserves a bit more respect, in my opinion, especially because, Brendan Moreno, considered a very good fighter, was on the pound-for-pound rankings. He beats him. Rovell's such a dangerous matchup, dangerous everywhere it goes, and dominated that fight. All the people he's beat on the way to the title as well. Just, for him, I think way more respect needs to be put on his name. And if we're talking about champions who we think will reign the longest, I think he's got to be right up there. I think Leon Edwards has some very dangerous fights in his division. Islam Makhachev maybe, but he's looking to move up. And there's also some very good lightweights. But Panjota's beat most of the top contenders once already, and we've seen how good he is in rematches. How many title defenses do you think he get? I think he might be on 1 or 2 already. He can easily stack up another 3, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Although, in my opinion, pound for pound doesn't mean anything to me.
No.
And that's the thing. You should be getting a bit more respect. You need to be giving him more respect regardless, because at the end of the day, this is still an official list in which the UFC is putting out there. And to be put a place below somebody who's just won the title, who's had a few, who's just fought, because with middleweight, right, even if we look at Strickland, really, he got to that title pretty quickly. He got that title shot very quickly, and he won it in all fairness to him. He did win it in all complete fairness. However, he didn't have to have loads of really hard
No,
fights. Like not that they're not hard fights, but really, really hard fights. Like it's not like the lightweight division.
Dricus went from fighting Darren Till, who's not even in the UFC anymore, who was on a massive skid, from jumping to Robert Whittaker, and yeah, fair play, beats him, but you know, Robert Whittaker was like first, probably like real world class fighter that he fought. Obviously, everyone in the UFC you can kind of consider world class, but that elite championship level fighter, Dricus managed to get past him, and you know, at this flyweight weight class and these lower weight class, Panchota probably ran through 2 champions before he got the belt. I think that needs to be considered. Obviously, pound for pound, yeah, it doesn't mean nothing. I think it should if it was done better. I think it's a very smart, logical thing to do. Like, who's the best fighter in the world if weight classes weren't a thing? I like the idea of that, you know, as a UFC fan, that's kind of fun to sit there and argue with your mates who you think that is. So, yeah, I think the pound for pound rankings need work. I think they're done by the media. Maybe just obviously never let the fans do it, but maybe UFC should put out an official one. I know there's one on their website, but I'm pretty sure that's done by media teams as well, like Bloody Elbow or whatever all them sort of websites are. So yeah, I think that needs a change. There isn't loads more to talk about really. Obviously, no card next week. Out of 10, how would you rate this pay per view overall?
So I think that had potential to be really good. I think it did. However, I don't think that really lived up to. I thought the championship fight. It was okay. It was okay. It was entertaining, but it wasn't super exciting. It wasn't anything to really look at and be like, wow, this is, you know, there weren't really any wars at all. Really, they were all fairly dominant performances, I'd say, with the exception of maybe the Arnold Allen fight, which was probably very good. That could be maybe like 5 per card, really.
Yeah.
You know, I'm about the championship fight itself. Strikers overall, you get a card like this every so often. And it was interesting because I do feel like this card was kind of like built with giving favourable matchups as well. Yeah. And it did kind of show. I mean, if you look at like the Neil Magny one, Matt the only one, which in my opinion is like a really big upset.
Yeah. I mean, I maybe thought Chris Curtis would have a bit of an easier job with Barriott. That was quite a close fight in the end, but overall, out of 10, I'd probably give it a 4.5 or 5. I don't know. What do you think?
I guess 6 maybe.
6.
Yeah, it wasn't. There were elements of it which were good. Elements of it was just like pretty mediocre. But it's hard because like ranked on a scale of 1 to 10, it's hard to number it. Like you know, your 6 is different to my 6, and
well, let's go like 10. 10 was the Cody Garbrandt, Dillashaw, George St. Pierre. Those sort of cards where you know this compared to those ones, it's hard to watch at points, but. You know, it was an okay card. I'm just happy UFC's back after what feels like such a long break. There's a break next weekend. But it's a decent fight night to get back on after the week after that. Molly McCann making a return. The next 2 pay-per-views are absolutely stacked, so can't wait to break them down. But so that's what we're going to talk about today. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Combat Chatters podcast. We will be getting a camera soon, so there'll be separate content coming out on YouTube, even hopefully making TikToks and shorts and stuff eventually too. So, yeah, make sure to share us around. We're looking to expand this year. We hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of the Combat Chatters podcast.